So guess what I was listening to in the car?
What?
This girl is on fire.
Love, just to amp it up. Beautiful.
Every song in your book, I had to sing along to.
There's like a whole playlist, isn't there? Love it.
Oh, yes. Hello to my Bologna beauties. It's your girl T, and you're listening to the Bologna podcast. So today we have with us in studio someone that you may recall from our relationship series that we had not too long ago, and someone who's actually been quite inspiring in my personal life, who's taught me to be a keen observer of myself. Now we're going to be chatting about her book, Gentle, A Healing Journey in No Particular Order. Now, the book Gentle is a personal memoir by wellness therapist and ontological coach Yolanda Arendse, who's also the founder of Gentle Life. Now, Yolanda describes her book Gentle as a memoir about taking her power and her life back after years of unchecked burnouts, which led to a complete anxiety attack. Although a personal account of her healing journey, this book is for every person who has lost themselves in some way and is so desperately trying to survive in their career or relationship after a dramatic or devastating loss. Yolanda's invitation in this book is for you to prioritize yourself and your well-being. And all you have to do is accept this invitation, because she's accepted ours of being here in the studio with us today. Yolanda, thank you so much for putting pen to paper and telling your story and having your story become a survival guide to many of us. In fact, there is a beautiful quote by one of your favorite authors, Brené Brown, which you quote in the book, which says, "One day you will tell your story of how you overcame what you went through, and it will become someone else's survival guide." Always a pleasure to have you on our show. Welcome to the Bologna podcast.
Tiniko, thank you very much. And truly, it is always an honor to be sitting opposite you, next to you, across the way from you in conversation. I appreciate the opportunity to be back here, to share in conversation, to talk and connect again. So I'm really honored. The last time we sat here, my book wasn't out, and now it's here.
I know.
So thank you.
This was launched in December, but of course it took you a while. I mean, you talk about how you actually started writing this during COVID, and I wonder if the COVID experience of the shutdown is what actually pushed you and drove you to write this book.
Yeah, there's part of that in there because it was a time of stillness for a lot of the world, had gone sort of inward. And so I went inward during that time, and that's where a lot of the writing had actually happened.
Yeah. No, that's amazing. I know Gentle is a memoir of your healing journey in no particular order. So just going with your narrative of no particular order, my questions are going to be in no particular order.
Great.
So for those readers who actually read your book, if my questions are jumping from one chapter to the other, they're going to have to forgive me, please. But I will start with one of the quotes that you actually opened your book with. And this is a quote that I just read over and over again because it's just so beautiful. "These are words between yesterday's hurt and tomorrow's healing that need to be spoken. These are those words." Now, there's so many mountains that we all conquer in our lives, some big, some small. But in those moments, we always go into this deep despair and not realizing that we've actually overcome, all of these mountains that previously seemed insurmountable. This book is a reflection of the experience you went through to become the person that you are today. And while this reflection has become a survival guide to others, has it completely helped you heal? And how important is reflecting to your healing?
Yeah, I think that opening quote, which is something I wrote, and it feels like it just came through me at some point. But exactly what it says, there are words between yesterday's hurt and tomorrow's healing, which need to be spoken. And I suppose that is what reflection really is. It's taking something that is sort of in our subconscious mind. It's somewhere in the background.
Yeah.
and really bringing it to the fore to look at it and then to see what we want to do with it. So, in fact, there's someone who has a quote like that. He says, I think his name is Michael Walzer. He says, you cannot intervene in a world you cannot see. And so it really is taking something that's blind to you and starting to look at it. And so that's really what reflections are. And it's exactly what I had to do with myself. It really became the basis for this book. In reflecting, I did a lot of journaling.
Okay.
Really to pour out what was sitting inside of me as questions, as curious things that I wasn't sure about. And then in reflecting on them and really picking it apart and looking at it, I started seeing the picture more clearly for myself.
Okay.
And so I think reflections play a big role in how we make progress with ourselves.
Yeah.
You know, we can't, if we're making the same mistake or doing something repetitively that seems to be hurting us, if I keep, I don't know, slamming my hand in the door as I'm shutting it, and I shut the door again 3 times and my hand's still getting slammed in it, there might be something wrong. So I need to pause and take stock of what's happening around me, assess what's going on. Why is the door keep slamming in my hand? It might be because there's a stopper in the door and it's stopping whatever from happening. So the point being that when we slow down and really take stock, we get to reflect and look at what's happening around us. And from that, perhaps something new can come, something that wasn't available to us before because of the state of busyness we were in.
Yeah.
So that's really how I believe reflections play a big role in how we move forward and sort of evolve as people.
Yeah. And I suppose with you journaling, I mean, you're a checklist person. You always used to write down everything that you had to do during the day. So journaling was probably your way of actually putting the truth in front of you so that you could see that this was something that you had to work on.
Absolutely that, because it was taking it from the unseen. Sometimes these thoughts kind of swim around there and we have an idea that there's something whispering that needs to be looked at. But unless, in my case, I actually put it down on paper. And for me, the act of journaling, writing by hand and pouring my energy onto a page really got me to see. So it was sort of a checklist of a different sort. But yes, it did. It got me to look at things and reflect it back.
And did that take a while, your healing journey? Did it happen over a year or is it still happening now?
Right. It is still happening. And that's the thing, albeit that I'm now a certified coach and I'm a wellness therapist in different things, I think the learning never stops because our growing never stops.
Yeah.
We might reach different stages of our learning and new understandings of ourselves. But I feel like every day when we wake up, there is a new version of ourselves. Every experience we have, every engagement we have, there is a version of ourselves showing up. And so I think we never stop learning and growing.
Sure.
I think when we do stop, it's done. We'll breathe our last breath and then we'll go on to another version. But as long as we're here as human beings, I think there's always an evolutionary process and a chance to see our becoming. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, what was the most exciting part for me about reading this book is I got to know the Yolanda, you know, not Yolanda, the wellness therapist and ontological coach, which, by the way, I remember I had to figure out what this ontological
coaching was.
Exactly. But really just your upbringing, this ambitious person who graduated top of her grade, top of her class in PR and communications, and just did so well and was so driven and wanted to become financially independent because you had that experience where your dad had his business, had financial distress, and then your family had to be separated. Your siblings had to live with an aunt and some church friends. And so you were driven to really change the trajectory of your life. And you wanted that financial independence, and it was so important for you.
Yeah.
And I mean, I remember me stepping into the old mutual offices in my heels and just ready to do this professional life and start my career. And I want to know, like, who was the Yolanda who walked into that PR and advertising agency, which is now Ogilvy South Africa. And I mean, that is like the crown of it all. When you start working there, you know you've made it. But who was this Yolanda? Was she happy? You know, and I'm trying to imagine you just being with your colleagues and sitting and having lunches with them. And in answering that question of were you happy, what led you to this prison that you created?
So you allude to this, the upbringing and the experience that I have that sort of shaped me into wanting to drive my own success and being financially independent and free and secure. And so the little girl who grew up was very ambitious. And so in those early years of my career, I poured myself into that stuff. I was so determined and eager to take on a world that I'd previously almost been disconnected from and isolated from. Yes. And so in my desire to learn and grow and discover new things, I literally took it and grabbed it with both hands. And yeah, I had an incredible early career. I made beautiful friendships. I was this hungry person out there really enjoying her work. I mean, I worked in marketing comms for commercial property all the way through to sport, major international sporting events. It was very diverse. And I really loved being in those spaces. I mean, to this day, I have friendships that go back to my first job. So that's 30 years ago. And I still have friends from those early days because a part of me was always able to deeply connect and share a part of me that people felt safe with. And so that's the person that went around enjoying a career and, you know, starting to travel internationally as well. I had a lot of fun while I was working. However, I suppose part of that fun was me becoming more noticed for my work, the quality of my work. There were awards that followed so
the external validation.
It all started creeping in. And some of these labels about being the youngest ever and the top performer and the first in class, things that sort of eluded me in my childhood and now suddenly was available to me, they kind of became labels that I started liking and possibly liking a little bit too much because without knowing, they took on a different tone. And suddenly I couldn't see myself outside of these labels. And that's really where things shifted for me in my career, where what started feeling like a prison for me was because I felt like I was the only go-to person that could solve anything. I mean, a lofty idea, but when you're so determined to succeed, in my case, I was trying to control everything and maintain that trajectory I was on. And so that eventually became the thing that imprisoned me, was my inability to let anyone see me anything other than the successful person.
Sure.
Yeah.
And those labels you just held on to so strongly.
Yeah, it created an identity for me, and I almost stopped knowing myself outside of those labels. I'd invested so much energy and time and resources in crafting that version of myself, and I worked really hard. There were lots of late nights. There was a lot of sacrifice, travel away from home. So I was hardly going to let anyone take that away from me, right?
Yeah.
And yet, by doing so, I created a world around me where it was a forced reliance on me. And so it became hard for me, but I'd created that space where I was the person you have to come to.
Yeah, you just mentioned how you actually stopped knowing who you were. So your true identity shifted to this created identity, you know, with all the labels and all the external validation. And I'm just sticking with the prison analogy. And one of the things that makes us so mad about people who go to jail, who didn't do what they did, you know, so unjustly, and they get trapped into the prison. So they're unjustly incarcerated for wrongdoings, which, you know, they weren't even there for. And I actually think about that mini-series on Netflix, When They See Us, with those 5 young men who were actually wrongly accused for that crime that happened in Central Park.
Yeah.
And all I could think about when I was watching this is just how the best times of their life, they were robbed from that by being in prison during their prime years. And that's exactly what happened to you. You were imprisoned in your prime years. And in some way, that must have felt like coming out back into the world, life had just passed you by. How did you feel then? How did you make sense of the world around you when you walked out of that prison that you had enslaved yourself in?
Quite honestly, it was, I felt dazed. I felt disorientated in a world where I didn't know who to be outside of these identities I'd created. Suddenly, when I was alone with myself, because I'd left the industry, I resigned and left immediately. This question of who am I without these labels? Who am I without this title, this role, this big career? And to integrate and to really start to see who I was, I had to spend a lot of time with myself, really go inward very deeply, because all my relationships were reflecting that I wasn't really present. People didn't really know truly who I was anymore because they only experienced a version of me which was strongly linked to my work identity.
Yeah.
And who was I without these labels? Who was I, the version that I truly wanted to be in the world? And somewhere on the inside, I knew it was there, but it was covered up by so many layers. And that's when the journaling started, with me really going inward and really looking to see, who am I? Who am I truly without a job title, without being a business owner? Who am I truly in the world? And that took some decluttering and delayering and really looking inward. Yeah.
Geez, and contrast this world to where you collapsed at the office. And all you could think about was how others perceived you. I mean, there's a quote in your book where you said, in your moments of weakness, oh, how the mighty have fallen. And you were being admitted for chronic anxiety and panic attack, yet you still cared what others thought.
And when I reflect on that now, I still have to have little moments of forgiving myself for having that perception that I needed to be a certain way in the world. At the moment when I was at my most raw and vulnerable, when there was nothing left to hold me together anymore, literally least of all my body, because as I was walking out the office, I was being supported. I was walking out barefoot. Those stilettos had come off my feet.
Can't wear them anymore anyway.
Right?
So it's fine.
And we've just given up on those because we can be who we are without them. But in a moment, I still thought, I wonder what people are thinking at this moment. Oh, how the mighty have fallen is what they might be thinking. Because at that point, my identity was so woven into the world's perception of me. Because I'd gone around being, really focused, really strong, a leader that showed up by example, that was there at 6 a.m. and last to leave our projects or our client events. And so how suddenly could I be the one falling down? How could this person who held everything together suddenly be the one that can't even hold herself together? And it came from the place of people pleasing. I had really shaped myself around always trying to please everyone, trying to make everyone happy. And it was a way for me to remain in the inner circle. For me, I thought it was a way for me to have a voice in the world. And so I almost bent myself in the most awkward ways so that I could make everyone happy. And in that moment, as I walked out the office or was being supported out the office, that voice of shame came in with, these statements we hear, oh, how the mighty have fallen.
Yeah.
And despite being at such a low point, that feeling still surfaced for me.
Sure. A burnout after 21 years of being in the marketing industry, which, by the way, I had no idea was cutthroat, eh?
Poor Raf.
I thought it was just finance, but clearly marketing is something else, hey? You guys have some deadlines.
Right. It can be cutthroat. Yeah. Yeah.
And this was 6 months before turning 43. And I'm just throwing that out for people who like to do the maths. But I'm putting the context here because I think we live in a society where it's very different now. It's not 23 years later when we burn out, but it's within the first 3 to 6 months of starting in your job. And I'm not going to say the young professionals now, can't handle life, because in fact, I'm actually quite proud of the new generation for standing up to the system, because things do have to change, This isn't the new normal where we have to be working crazy hours till we get to a burnout. So there has to be a realization by society that there has to be a balance in life. So I'm not here to defend the working culture that we have today. But what I do want to touch on is the apparent lack of resilience that we seem to have in the society. And this is in relation to career progression. So I'm not sure, maybe it's the fact that, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, all of the lower needs have been met. So we're now sitting in this realm of self-actualization. So if anything is too hard, then we're not even going to try. It's not even going there. But I just wonder, in terms of just the young professionals, they've changed, but on the other hand, the system hasn't yet evolved. It's still back in this archaic blood, sweat, and tears kind of approach. So how do young professionals coexist in this old way of working and still have a sense of achievement in their careers?
Beautiful. That's so interesting because I actually get to work with that question in the reality of while I'm sitting across a young employee in a corporate environment where I'm coaching, because they tend to struggle a lot with, I'm a whole person. I've got all these other things that need taking care of and that I want to be and express and experience in the world. And I'm not just all career, right? And so you're right that perhaps even in particularly my generation, now that you've mentioned 43 plus, comes from a blood, sweat and tears kind of grinding way of working. We don't stop until the work's done. And yet, with the evolution of where we are now, young people are feeling more allowed and spacious within in themselves to choose a balance of that, right? And so firstly, I think there's a combination of the evolution of corporate needing to catch up to where the younger generations are at. And I think it's a conversation between the two, where younger people in their careers have to adjust their perspective. So while you do want to lead a balanced life, it perhaps requires having intentional conversations with your leadership or your manager about what your requirements in life are, who you are in the world, what it is that you need to do and be to be the full expression of yourself, and not to create the perception that I'm going to come in and work 24/7, but once you land the job, to back off from that. So firstly, I think it's a meeting halfway, both the leaders who now lead organizations and younger generations come in. I think new conversations are needed for this to carve a new way, to direct a new path with regards to this. I think authenticity plays a role. If we can find balance in, we get nourished and rewarded and the feeling of success from different parts of our lives. So you can still move your career forward. It might not mean climbing the corporate ladder, every second year being promoted into a new role. A younger person or a new generation person might find success in if I'm doing more projects, if I'm reaching a better audience, if I'm having more impact in the current environment and role. I mean, that is equal to success for me. And so I really feel this is about conversation because you can't be stuck in the old school way of thinking, because I come from that way of operating, and hence I burnt out. And I'm very aware now that younger people can't be treated that way. But if they're still looking for career fulfillment and they're looking to expand their careers, is to find success at different levels of their career and find success and value in different ways that they experience what they're doing for their work.
I was just reminded of a conversation we had earlier with the relationship series about being authentic as early as the interview stage as well. Because the interview is not just about you as the candidate, but you're also assessing whether this company is a right fit for you. So in that conversation, in that setting, that's where you both assess whether you fit into the culture and how the working relationship will begin.
Precisely that. And I remember that conversation we had. And I feel like if that's more of what we can teach the younger generations coming in, the graduates who are entering programs within organizations, is to truly know yourself and in that interview authentically represent yourself. I got to do a beautiful masterclass a week and a bit ago. It's with a UN program through Siemens called Empower Her. And it's these high school students and varsity leaders that are just about to enter the workplace as interns in the STEM space. And the talk with them really was about truly get to know yourself, learn how to speak up, how to represent yourself, and how to bring the gift that is you into the workplace. But get clear about that as you're entering your career. Otherwise, you're kind of setting yourself up for failure when you don't truly know who you are and you're expecting to be treated a certain way. So really to get to know yourself really well before you're entering into the space. And again, it comes back to those conversations.
I mean, you talk about how as graduates, we need to teach them how to know themselves already. And I'm just thinking, did I know myself at that stage? I was still trying to figure myself out. And I'm just reminded of your childhood, which you briefly touch on as well in the book. And I could relate to just the feelings of shame and building the walls around you, because I also had quite a similar upbringing with a very conservative and religious family. So I could truly relate with that. And that made me realize just how much of our childhood traumas we actually bring into the workplace and into the relationships that we have. We're basically all just still children trying to figure out who we are in this world, and trying to find out who we are and what are the things that we actually like, how to define ourselves. And so knowing what you know today, if you had to go back to that classroom and say something, give a message to that Yolanda who froze in front of the teacher because she couldn't say or answer what happened on the news last night because you didn't have a television at home, but the class didn't know that. So if you had to go back, visualize that moment and just give a little bit of a whisper to that Yolanda, what would you say?
Right. I love that too, because often when I am working with clients, I get them to go back to a younger version of themselves to have a conversation. And so I would probably tell that version of me something I know now from a Rumi quote, which says, there is a voice inside that doesn't use words. Listen. And so what I would probably say to that young version of myself is trust your heart. Trust what that inner part of you is saying. Because the inner part of me would have said, it's okay to say to the teacher, I don't have a TV at home. I do love storytelling. Can I tell a story that wasn't on the news?
Yeah.
And then perhaps that being conversation, we could have worked out a different solution. But I didn't know to trust that intrinsic part of me yet. It had been taught to be quiet, to not speak up, to not represent yourself. But somewhere inside of us, the authentic, original part of us is never lost, it's just covered up. So I would probably go back to her and say, trust your heart. What would your heart do?
Yeah.
And her heart would probably waddle up to the teacher and say, look, I can't really do this because of that. How can we do it differently? So more trusting myself is what it would be, speaking up. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. And I think that's so important that we all just need to trust ourselves, because the answer does actually lie within.
100%. Yeah, I mean, I love Rumi. So,
Yeah.
I mean, as he was such a wise, steward of humanity's emotions and feelings, and he expressed it so very well. But he says your heart knows the way. Run in that direction.
Yeah.
And it all speaks to this inner wisdom, this intuitive knowing within ourselves. And we've just, as the world's grown and the advancement of technology and so much incoming data and noise in the world, we've forgotten to know what it is to truly trust ourselves and to tune in and to truly listen. Because when we do that, there is a knowledge that comes through. There's a part of us that actually wants the best for our highest good. And if we can just give that voice a chance to speak more clearly, it can guide us. It's like an internal GPS.
That's so true.
Right?
And it's not only just trusting yourself, but also trusting that the universe is for you. It's working for you,
Has
not
your
against
back.
you. It has your back. Exactly. I mean, I know I'm late to the party, but I am reading The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle.
Beautiful.
I think I'm only
powerful.
ready for it now. I did try it quite a while ago, and it just,
I like that.
You see,
because books find you when you're ready for it.
Yes.
And so, you're receptive to it now. Beautiful.
And just in the book, it talks about how anxiety really forms because our minds are in the future, and we're trying to solve a problem that hasn't even occurred yet.
Doesn't exist.
So now you're anxious about this problem that doesn't exist. And what you need to trust is that you possess all of the potential to solve that problem when it comes, at that moment.
Right.
Not today, but at the moment when that
Right.
problem arises. And so it's just trusting that the universe is working for you and not against you.
100%. It so has your back. Even my entire journey in this part of the story, and there were ups and downs, and as you know, it happened in no particular order.
Yeah.
But I see nothing out of place with any single one thing that transpired in my life. From the most extremely difficult to horrendous to every experience has shaped me and who I am today,
Yeah.
and has prepared me to this moment for everything I'm currently experiencing. And when I walk out this door, everything I will experience will then prepare me for a future moment. And so, isn't that beautiful? It kind of relieves us of this need to worry so much about the
Yes.
future.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just also love that. I know I read it this morning. That's why I can just
Powerful.
relate to this, because you talk about how every single experience brought you to where you are. There is no bad or good. There just is. And we just need to let go and learn from it. So
I love that idea. I'm on this notion that we've come here to experience ourselves as human.
Yes.
And if we can accept that and embrace that, then no good or bad, no right or wrong. Just experience for our betterment, for our becoming. So beautiful.
Our becoming.
I'm so happy that you're getting such nuggets from that book.
No, I'm really enjoying it.
Right.
So there was another time in your life when you froze. And this experience is when you had a gun to your head. In Joburg, we all live in fear of any violent crime, and that actually steals so much from us that we don't feel free. You're not safe wherever you go. So the fact that you experienced that and you lived through that was quite scary when I read that. I was just in shock. I was like, wow. You really faced a moment when you had to think about your mortality and your life flashed in front of your eyes. And you had your son as well, who was watching the whole thing happen.
Right.
So how much of that brief moment did it help in terms of changing your outlook on life, if at all?
Right. So in the moment, my reaction was to freeze in terms of fright or flight. I literally froze. I couldn't get out of the moment. And yeah, my life did flash before my eyes. Not in visual pictures, but in the sense that in a split second, something could end here.
Yeah.
Right. And so when it was all over and we got away unharmed, we ran into the house, and I remember just finding the nearest wall and sinking down against the wall with my back against it. And the first sort of feeling that came out of me was a very loud, angry, guttural scream. I think I was angry because in that moment I felt, how could my life mean so little to these men, surrounded by three men, one with a gun pointed right at me?
Yeah.
And immediately it came to me. And the sobs followed, because I, in that moment, realized not only did my life mean very little to them,
Sure.
apparently I didn't see very much value in my own life, because all I had been doing to that point was work. I worked and worked and worked. I was pulling 16 to 18-hour days, 7 weeks on the trot, and then having some kind of body breakdown, and then taking 3 days off, and then coming straight back into it. So I didn't really make time for my family and connections. My parents would come visit me and stay for 3 weeks, and they'd see me at 9:30, 10 at night, because
Sure.
I'd leave very early in the morning and get back late. And so it seemed I cared very little for my own life, because even the next morning, I went straight back to working directly after this incident. Less than 12 hours later, I'd opened my laptop and I started working again.
Sure.
But eventually, I think those were one of my wake-up calls, because then it started dawning on me that I'm completely out of alignment with what is true and what is really important and what is real life here, because I was so focused on that career.
Sure. When you mentioned just how you felt so insignificant, and like, how could, those three men just look at you like your life was just worth nothing. Right. They could just take the car. Right. And, one of your ways of healing is around doing nothing. And it was just sitting and doing nothing. And that was the most difficult thing for you to do, because you drew your significance from being needed.
Right.
And it just goes to this whole thing of us pursuing success, pursuing ambition, and it should always be an outward expression to the world and never an inward expression to ourselves. And so in doing that nothingness, in being where you are, where do you draw your significance from now?
So initially that waking up and doing nothing, I had to redefine my labels
Yeah.
of who am I in the world? Who am I without those corporate labels, without the labels of being business owner and top performer, etc., etc. And right now, my ambition and what drives me is strongly linked more to an intrinsic value.
Yeah.
It is, who am I? And I often love asking clients this question, if they're really struggling with, who am I? Who am I really in the world? And I often ask them, who were you before the world told you who to be? Because that really gets us to see who we are. And so the version of me that shows up now, which is strongly aligned to an intrinsic value, is I show up because I do purposeful work in the world now, which has got to do with even reaching one person at a time. If I get to sit opposite one person and they get to take a look inward and start to make new agreements with themselves, if they start to shift something about themselves so that they can be a better version, that helps me go to bed at night just sleeping a lot more peacefully. So the ambition that drives me is doing mission-filled work, purpose-filled work in the world, of sitting across another, person to person, human to human. I feel it's the best form of marketing for the human race, is really asking this question, who am I? And how do you want to show up in the world? What do you want to bring? What is that gift that you uniquely have that is needed in the world? And so now all my ambition is around coaching conversations, around helping us remember to live in balance with nature and in harmony with this thing called life. Yes, there is the system created by us as humans in terms of post-industrial revolution, but can we live in a more natural way with our biorhythms? And if I can teach more of that and shed light on that, or ask questions around that get people to shift, then I feel I'm truly doing what I was meant to do in the world.
Yeah, I like that. It's still having a purpose, you know. And you mentioned how it's bringing the gift that you have into the world, what the world needs as well. So it reminds me of those three circles, Ikigaya, in terms of what the world needs and what you enjoy doing as well. There needs to overlap. So it's not just about what the world needs. It's not give.
Right.
You also need to enjoy it yourself. And that's where you draw the purpose, the enjoyment, and it becomes part of you as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I do like that balance, the overlap.
And you know, it's creating new meaning. It's reframing what success is deemed to be, right? In the past, success for me was all that other stuff. And it served a purpose, and it got me to where I am now.
Yeah.
So my whole past career in marketing and being a co-business owner, it definitely serves me now as I'm sitting in the world across a leader in a corporate space. So it's not gone and forgotten. But now with the context of understanding all of it, I get to have different conversations with people. And, you know, one person shifting in their own lives, they get to have an impact with their team at work. They get to have an impact with their family at home, with their community. So I really feel inspired by reaching one person at a time. You know, sometimes I get to speak to 50 people on a big Teams masterclass, or 100 people in an auditorium. But when I can reach one person at a time, it has the same value for me.
Yeah. You know, I think about that question not every day, but almost every day, just around what success means to me, because, you know, you always have this thing in your mind where, you know, I have to get to a certain level to enjoy life, and then I've made it. And you get reminded by seeing all these things. So, I mean, we were looking through CEO remuneration at banks, and I mean, some of them are hitting 100 million a year. So
Incredible.
They're earning 100,000 rand a day. And you're thinking, gee whiz, I got some work to do. How am I going to have all of those 4 children that I'm targeting?
Right.
Exactly. And I have to come back to myself and realize what do I define success as?
Right.
And not what the world defines success as, because trust me, living in a castle might be great, but if it's an empty castle, it will mean nothing to me.
Right.
I'm a community person. I need my people around me. And so defining success for yourself is so important, and taking these labels away and these expectations that the world has.
Success certainly, I mean, I think it gets modeled for us as being a one-dimensional thing,
Yes.
either just career or just climbing that ladder and reaching that 100
Yeah.
million. Well,
Oh, yeah, I mean, wouldn't complain if I get there. I mean,
but often what is the cost of that
What's the-
success? You know,
exactly.
what is the trade-off? And if it costs you too much of your personal time, if it costs you your health, if it costs you, then is it true success? And so if we start to reframe what the world's definition of success is, because I think it's all around us, it gets pushed at us all the time. We go into award season, whether it's movie awards, and then it's all the awards, and we
these
just
Grammys, these Oscars,
right,
yes.
and it's the hoisted trophy above
On
the
to the
head,
next,
look,
yeah.
and then on to the next and on to the next, and we get told that is what success is, and we
true.
forget that success sometimes it's the small little wins.
Yeah,
When I see the lights come on in someone's eyes in a coaching session,
yeah.
that for me is success, because
Love
today
that.
someone goes home with a new perspective of themselves. That's success. And it doesn't always get a trophy or a gold star.
It's true.
We're bombarded with the stuff. I look at Instagram reels and other platforms. Every time your reel reaches 100 or 300, you get a gold star.
Okay.
Or you get
There's
prompted to
always
move.
something you have
We're being
to
pushed for this success. But what is success truly? I think we each have to define it for ourselves.
Yeah, that's true.
Right. And for me, it means something different versus what it means for you.
Yeah.
To me, for example, when I'm going to bed at night and my nervous system is at rest and there are no butterflies in my stomach and I actually have a good solid night's rest, because previously I didn't have that. That is
4
success
hours
to
of
me
sleep,
now.
that's all you
right.
had.
Just operating on 4.
Sure.
So when I get to pull 8 hours, minus the menopause, but when I get to pull 8 hours now, that is what success looks like for me.
Yeah.
When I wake up and I'm not anxious about what's happening in my day and that I'm going to get through everything, now I feel more relaxed. That's more what success looks like for me. Yeah.
Yeah. Look, it doesn't remove the need for having ambition. I mean,
Right.
it's who we are naturally. And one thing that I also got out from your book is just around the sense of ownership and how important that was to you. So I'm reminded by that story on the 2nd of January, a day after New Year's. How dare you get this message from your business partner? Things I need to do at work. I'm finally on leave and I'm not always on leave.
Right.
And so you just felt you're a business partner and here you are still reporting to another senior exec, and it just felt like all these layers, the ownership structure just didn't make you feel like you were a partner, and that affected the way you worked, your experience of the workplace. And I think that this is also important for a lot of people, just having a sense of ownership in what they do. And I know it's very difficult for all of us to be CEOs. And I'm not saying everyone needs to be the CEO to have a sense of ownership. But I even feel it in the fact that, I give 100% of my work, but boy, does it feel like an effort if I'm not even benefiting from anything that I'm doing at all. So just in terms of, ownership in the workplace and how important it is, especially for, hard and driven professionals, how can we satisfy that desire and make everyone happy? I know it feels like an HR question, but it's one I grapple with all the time, is in having that sense of ownership in the workplace.
Right. So ownership does not need to be on paper in the portion of shares or how many directorship, whatever shares you hold, etc. Ownership can be in what am I owning in terms of my workspace? How am I owning my project? How do I own the success of what I contributed? So ownership can come in different forms. And again, we've been given the concept that ownership means only that.
Yeah.
It's got a lot to do with, again, what you value as a person, what you deem success to be for you. And so how can you create the feeling of ownership within the environment and the space that you have? So it doesn't have to be on paper. If I deem myself to achieve certain things on a project and we hit certain markers and milestones, I can own the success around that. It's like the process of learning to validate yourself, because internal locus of control versus external.
Yeah.
Otherwise we look into the external environment to say to us, it's okay, you belong, you own this stuff.
Yeah.
Whereas you can own your authenticity, you
Your
can
time.
own your integrity, you can own your time.
Your decisions. Yeah.
Precisely that. And so we need to shift the meaning of what true ownership is.
Yeah.
So on paper, it's great because, yes, it leads us to that 100 bar. But maybe we all don't want that. Maybe other forms of ownership is more valuable to us. Because when I own my time and I'm in control of what I do spend time on and what I don't versus being forced to, that is hugely successful for
That's
me,
so true.
Right?
Yeah. Okay, you've opened up my mind. Yeah.
Time,
it's so true.
energy, all of that.
Yeah.
You own that stuff. Yeah.
Yes. I think especially just given the freedom to think and being able to run your projects independently. So, yeah, ownership is very different. It doesn't.
We have to bring it down to these levels and break it down and make it more granular. Otherwise, it seems like pie in the sky, unattainable, or far out of our reach. It has to be on a daily basis with the day-to-day experiences. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, I mean, as we getting to the end of our podcast, I mean, the healing journey. So just going through that, I was really just inspired by it. And mostly because it was almost a coming back to nature. So you talk about how you started off with sleep.
Yeah.
Like you said,
Most
getting your 8
important.
hours in as opposed to this 4 hours and waking up and just working. And then food as well. Your diet was an important factor in just being able to eat right. I still follow your steps of having that lemon water in the morning,
right?
To break the fast. I still do that.
Right. Brilliant for just neutralizing the gut and bringing all that acid into balance again.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
And it's such a simple thing. It's so funny how, the optimal state of our humanity is really just embedded in us. Sleeping
Naturally.
is something that happens naturally. You should be able, to listen to just your cravings and be able to feed yourself the right nutrients in terms of your diet.
Right.
And yet we steer far away from what is right for us.
Precisely.
How important was nature in you coming home to yourself?
Nature has always, I've always felt very connected to nature. I grew up hiking and being out in the wild. But really, as part of that healing journey, going back into nature, planting my feet back into the earth.
Yeah.
I did a lot of at home, just in the back garden while I was on my return to coming into wholeness. I just sat outside, walked barefoot on the grass, put a picnic blanket down and would just lie on the grass and look at the sky. But a lot of it had to do with immersing myself in the arms of nature again. You alluded to this now. Nature is inherent. It is intrinsic to us. It's who we are. We are made of the same things. And nature is such a great teacher. It understands its natural rhythms. It knows when to rest. We fight sleep because we get too busy or we go by the clock. I know we have all these wearable apps and things, but we don't need something to tell us it is bedtime, wind down now. Our bodies know what to do, but we've started ignoring all of those things. The same with food. And nature also, it knows when to produce. It knows, the tree knows when to go into rest. It knows when to produce new leaves, when to produce fruit. It knows what to do.
Yeah.
We can learn so much from nature. I remember I spent a lot of time camping. I hiked mountains. I walked and swam in rivers. And I got to see how nature is very intuitive.
Yeah.
And it knows exactly what to do. I watched ants going about their daily grind. Sorry.
No problem.
Oh, I felt that one coming from my cab. It's trying to block it.
Do the same. Okay, the ants.
We're good? The ants. So just being in nature, I watched ants going about their daily grind, collecting food and knowing what to do. I watched a wasp return to the same place knowing where its nest is 3 days in a row.
Sure.
And it's because it trusts itself intrinsically. There is an innate wisdom there. And just as human beings, we've become so busy, we've forgotten to be still and quiet
Yeah.
and to tune in and listen. And so nature is a big healer. Your body knows exactly what to do. It knows how to speak and show you when something's wrong.
Yeah.
When we have headaches for 3 days in a row, that is not natural. Our bodies are telling us something's off here.
Yeah.
You're either not getting enough sleep or enough water to regenerate your cells.
Instead,
Something's
what
off.
do we do? Reach out for the aspirin.
Pop the pill.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
But our bodies are telling us it needs support in a more natural, more organic way. And we just need to just tune in a little bit more. I recently watched this beautiful masterclass on Mayan wisdom.
Okay.
And the Mayan people lived in they still do, in a very natural way, very close to the earth and within the rhythms of the earth.
Yeah.
And I think African people do the same. And the first peoples of Australia, the Aborigines, I think the first people knew how to live in connection with nature, trusting deeply in that. And we've become, through the system, too disconnected. A lot of my work is centered around tuning in,
Yeah.
softening the busyness, just to trust your body again, trust your intuition, because the wisdom is all there.
Yeah. And I know how you mentioned how the system has changed it, but we shouldn't blame that.
No.
We should find ways to be grounded
Thank
in
you.
nature as well. I mean,
Within
just
the
looking
system,
at within the
precisely.
system. I look at construction sites and I always see how they build the walls, and I think, wow, we live in boxes. We put ourselves in these boxes, and so that is why we have all of this anxiety within us, because we're so disconnected with nature. So it is important for us to go out there into nature, sit under a tree and do nothing, just feel the grass and connect with nature and come back home to ourselves.
Precisely. We can literally, you don't even have to do anything in nature, just go
Yes.
and be with it. Just go be. Take off the shoes. This thing that removes us from connecting, just literally plant yourself on the ground, even if you're doing it in the garden at home.
Yeah.
It brings our nervous systems back into rest. And just being still in nature really will awaken that stuff in us that's always been there. Yeah.
It's always been there. Come home to yourself.
There.
And one quote I'm going to end with is Paulo Coelho. Anything that costs you your inner peace is too expensive. It's beautiful to see how you found your peace throughout your journey. And this is what I wish for our Bologna community as well.
Right.
So if you have a last message to give to our Bologna community, what would that be?
Yeah, that if you can just go inward more, get into stillness and truly connect with that inner voice, it always has something to say. And unlike the external noises, it has your best interest at heart. So trust more in this innate wisdom within you. It'll guide you to what's good for you.
Yeah. Be kind with yourself. Be
Gentle and kind.
I love this book. And in fact, you've given us a book that we can give to
Right,
a lucky
we've done
listener
that.
as well. So please pop a comment and maybe the first or the third. Let's see.
1, 2, we'll pick a number.
We'll pick a number and see who can take this beautiful book home. I've read it twice. I'm going to read it again. And thank you so
Beautiful.
much for being here with us today. Where can people find you?
Thank you very much. It's always just an honor to sit with you. So I'm grateful that today my conversation got to be with you. So thank you. And to the listeners that are going to tune in and hear this podcast. I'm available at thegentlelife.org. That is my website, thegentlelife.org. And on the platform, you can find my book is available currently on print on demand. And then I'm on LinkedIn as Yolanda Arendse, The Gentle Life. Come and connect with me there. I post some insights around leadership, always self-care and checking in with yourself. So, yeah, you can find me there. And I'd love to connect with all of you, really.
And we'll keep connecting with you. Thank you for
Absolutely.
being here to tell our story. And please continue to tell your stories as well. Take care.